The sky above turned red. Commander Cross watched from the observation deck as the ships descended through the atmosphere. There were dozens of them, maybe more. His military experience told him this was not a small raid. This was an invasion. The colony had 15,000 people, 15,000 souls who came to this world hopping for a better future. They built farms and homes. They created a community far from Earth. Now those ships brought death from the heavens. Communication officer Davis stood beside him. His hands shook as he typed reports. The young man was only 23, and this was his first real crisis. Around them, the observation deck was chaos. Workers ran to their stations. Alarms screamed through the corridors. "Contact from Governor Hayes," Davis said, his voice thin and scared. "He wants to know what we do now." Did not answer right away. He stared at those descending ships. Each one was massive, easily 10 times the size of any human vessel. The Empire did not build small things. They built for power and intimidation. Both worked well. The governor wanted answers, had none. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He fought in conflicts on Mars. He defended colonial outposts on distant moons. He understood war, but this was different. Earth was 2 weeks of transmission time away. Help would not come quickly, if it came at all. "Tell the governor I am coming," finally said. "Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel to the underground bunkers, now." The bunkers were supposed to be for emergencies, flooding, equipment failures, not alien invasion, but had always prepared for the worst. It was the only way to survive in space. 20 minutes later, stood in Governor Robert Hayes' office. Hayes was 60 years old, and this was his 5th year running the colony. He was a good administrator. He knew how to keep people fed and systems running. He did not know how to fight a war. "How long do we have?" Hayes asked. "Hours," said. "Maybe less. They will start bombing soon. They always do." "Can we surrender?" Looked at the older man. Hayes was serious. Fear had made him desperate. "We can try," said, "but we do not know if they accept surrender. The files from the command structure suggest they see human colonies as primitive. We might not even be worth talking to." Hayes walked to his window. Below, colonists ran through the streets. Some carried children. Some carried what few possessions they could grab. Families broke apart as evacuation orders sent them in different directions. "My daughter is in the medical center," Hayes said quietly. "She is 8 weeks pregnant." Said nothing. He understood what Hayes was really saying. He was wondering if his family would survive. "We defend," said. "We hold this colony. We keep people alive long enough for Earth to respond. Earth is 2 weeks away from even knowing we are under attack." "Yes," agreed, "but Earth will send help. Humans always help other humans." It was not true, and they both knew it, but they needed to believe it. The first bombs fell 30 minutes later. The explosions came from the west, where the water treatment plant sat. Felt the ground shake from the impact through the floor beneath his feet. Alarms screamed again. This time, they screamed for real damage. Davis reported that 300 people worked at the water treatment plant. The update came 20 seconds later. Structural collapse, unknown casualties. Captain Lisa Morgan was the colony's lead scientist and physician. She ran the medical center, and she understood the colony's systems better than anyone except. When the bombs started falling, she made immediate decisions. She moved patients to deeper rooms in the underground sections. She called every medical staff member to duty. She prepared for what was coming. Lisa was 40 years old and strong in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength. She had survived the collapse of the Europa mining facility. She had helped birth Bobbies in storm shelters. She would not break now. She moved through her medical center giving orders. Nurses brought supplies from storage. Doctors prepared trauma units. There was not enough medicine. There was never enough medicine. But they would use what they had and save who they could save. The communication array was destroyed in the fourth bombing run. Received the news with a strange feeling of relief. Now they could not contact Earth and beg for help. They would not have to know for certain that no one was coming. They could pretend that rescue was on the way. Commander Cross gathered his military staff. There were 12 of them, 12 soldiers to defend 15,000 people. It was not enough, but it was what they had. "They will land troops soon," told them. "They always follow bombardment with ground assault. We cannot stop them with weapons. Our guns are too small. Our missiles are too few. But we can make them pay. We can make them bleed. And we can make them understand that we will not break." Was pilot. He was only 27, but he had flown combat missions. His hands were steady and his mind was quick. He volunteered to fly reconnaissance before they completely controlled the skis. "I can see their positions," said. "I can find their weak points." "You will probably die," said. "Yes," agreed, "but I will get you the information first." Ordered to take a small attack craft, the young pilot saluted and left to prepare his ship. Governor Hayes made a broadcast to the colony. He spoke to the cameras with calm in his voice, even though his hands trembled. "We will survive," he said. "We will defend our home. We will show the stars what humanity can do. We are not weak. We are not afraid. We will stand." It was not true they were afraid. They were very afraid, but truth did not matter. Hope mattered. Belief mattered. The governor gave the people both. By evening, almost all the colonists were in the bunkers. The upper levels of the colony were empty and dark. The ships circled overhead like predators. They were waiting for something, did not know what. Returned from his reconnaissance flight with damage to his aircraft. One of his wings was torn. His fuel was low, but he made it back and he brought information. "There are 22 major warships in orbit," reported. "Their landing forces are preparing. They will hit us in the morning. And Commander, there is no way off this world. They control everything above the atmosphere." Looked at his pilot. The young man was pale and bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were clear. "Then we stand," said. "We stand and we fight." "Until help arrives?" asked. "Until help arrives," agreed, knowing it was probably a lie. The night was dark and cold. In the bunkers below the colony, 15,000 people tried to sleep. Above them, the warships waited for morning. And above them, the stars burned cold and distant. No help was coming. They all understood that now. They were alone. They would have to save themselves. The distress beacon had been transmitting for 3 days when Captain Henry Foster heard it. The Discovery was a research vessel, not a warship. It carried scientists and equipment for studying deep space phenomena. It had minimal weapons. Its shields were designed to protect against solar radiation, not weapons fire. Henry Foster knew all of this as he listened to the garbled message coming from a human colony under attack. His first officer, Dr. Pierce, stood beside him in the command center. She had been born in space. Her parents were both astronomers. She understood the vast distances between worlds better than most people understood the spaces between cities. "Is 6 weeks away at maximum speed," she said, reading the navigation data. "We would arrive with almost no fuel left. The fleet could destroy us easily." "Yes," Henry agreed. "It would be suicide to go there." "Yes," Henry said again. He listened to the beacon again. The message was broken and filled with static, but the core was clear. A human colony was under invasion. People were dying. They were asking for help, any help. Henry Foster had been a soldier once. He served in the Earth Defense Force before joining the scientific community. He had made promises long ago. He promised to protect human lives. He promised to respond when people called for help. "Set course for 442, he told his navigation officer. "Maximum speed, now." The crew responded immediately. They were scientists, not soldiers, but they understood what was happening. A human colony was dying, and they were the only ones in range to help. Back on, the ground battle had begun. Commander Cross positioned his forces in the hills overlooking the main colony settlement. He had only 90 soldiers. They landed with 500 elite troops. The numbers were impossible, but had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for difficult. Flew his damaged fighter in circles above the battle, dropping explosive charges on positions. His weapons were small compared to their technology, but they caused problems. They had to take cover. They had to think about more than just advancing. The first attack from them came at dawn. They moved with perfect coordination, their armor glowing in the early light. Soldiers fired from their positions. Some shots connected, some fell, but more kept coming. Captain Lisa Morgan worked in the main medical bunker 3 levels below the ground. Injured soldiers arrived constantly, brought down by medical crews. Lisa moved between the wounded, assessing wounds and making quick decisions. Who could wait? Who needed surgery now? Who would not survive no matter what she did? A young soldier named came in with his leg nearly severed. Lisa looked at the wound and the young man's face. He was terrified. He was only 19. "Can you save it?" asked. Lisa did not lie. "No, but I can save your life. We are going to amputate and you will live. You will go home and you will tell people what happened here." Cried, but he nodded. Lisa gave him pain medication and got to work. Governor Hayes moved through the bunker checking on people. He was not a soldier, but he was the leader. People needed to see him calm and functioning. They needed to believe that someone was in control. Hayes found an old woman sitting alone in a corner of the bunker. She was not injured. She was not sick. She was just sitting and staring at the concrete wall. "What is your name?" Hayes asked. The woman said, "Stone. I was an engineer 30 years. I built the water treatment system." Hayes sat beside her. "You did important work." "It is destroyed now. The bombs destroyed it." "Then we will rebuild it," Hayes said. Looked at him with empty eyes. "There will be nothing left to rebuild." Hayes had no answer. He sat beside her in silence, and that was enough. The first battle lasted 4 hours. They pushed through defenses and reached the edge of the main settlement, ordered a retreat. His soldiers fell back, taking positions on the settlement's buildings and in the streets. They were confused. Human soldiers should be breaking. They should be surrendering. Instead, this small force kept fighting. It kept striking from unexpected angles. It kept refusing to die. A commander recorded a report to his superiors. He described the engagement as difficult. He mentioned human resistance as surprisingly effective. He recommended additional forces and continued bombardment. When the report reached the Empire's high command, they were insulted. Primitive humans were causing problems. The Empire decided to increase the pressure. They sent orders to completely destroy the colony if it did not surrender within the week. On the Discovery, Henry Foster received an update to the distress beacon. The message was clearer this time. The colony was fighting. The colony was still alive, but their supplies were running low. Disease was spreading in the bunkers. The assault was relentless. Henry made a decision that affected everyone on his ship. He diverted power from the scientific equipment to the engines. The Discovery accelerated even faster. They would arrive at 4:42 with almost no fuel and minimal supplies. They would probably die in the attempt. His crew understood. No one protested. Flew his fighter until the fuel gauge showed empty. He managed to glide the damaged craft back to the hidden airfield outside the colony. His hands shook as he landed. His body was exhausted, but he was alive. He reported to Commander Cross. "They are establishing a permanent position. They are bringing in more troops. In 1 week, they will have the strength to overrun our defenses completely." Understood. 1 week. That was all they had. That night gathered his command staff. Stone had emerged from her shock and joined them. She was an engineer and she had an idea. "The equipment," she said. "We captured some weapons in the first battle. I can study them. Maybe I can find weaknesses. Maybe I can improve our chances." "They have far superior technology," said. "But they did not build for harsh conditions," replied. "Earth is a harsh world. We live on a harsh world. Maybe they made mistakes." Assigned a team. They began taking apart a weapon in a hidden workshop beneath the settlement. Governor Hayes authorized the distribution of all remaining medicines and food. They would ration carefully, but they would not starve. Not yet. Captain Lisa Morgan established medical stations throughout the colony. She knew more wounded were coming. She would be ready. Volunteered to fly another reconnaissance mission. Refused. The young pilot was already pushing death away by force of will alone. He needed rest. "One more mission," insisted. "I can get closer. I can see their weak points." Wanted to refuse again, but they needed information. He authorized the mission. Flew out into the dark sky. Above him, the ships maintained their patrol. Below him, the colony fought to survive. Somewhere across the vast darkness of space, the Discovery accelerated toward them. Henry Foster and Pierce urged their ship faster. They did not know if they would arrive in time. They only knew that they had to try. The week of grace was starting. 7 days until they would have the power to finish the colony. 7 days until the impossible would become reality. Stone made a discovery that changed everything. She sat in the underground workshop, surrounded by pieces of weaponry. The equipment was advanced, yes, but it had flaws. They built for speed and power. They did not build for durability in extreme conditions. They did not anticipate that an enemy might study their weapons and find weaknesses. The armor they wore was strong, but it had joints. The joints were designed to be flexible. Flexibility meant small gaps. Gaps meant places where human weapons could penetrate if they were aimed correctly. Called Commander Cross to the workshop. She showed him the armor and pointed to the weak points. "Here," she said, touching the joint at the shoulder, "and here at the neck, and along the spine. These are places where their armor can be breached." Studied the armor. His military mind immediately began calculating angles of attack, firing positions, strategies. "You are certain?" he asked. "No," said. "But if we modify our weapons to focus fire on these points, we increase our chances significantly." Made a decision. He assigned soldiers to work with. They began modifying captured weapons and adjusting human weapons to target the weak points in the armor. The work went on through the night. By morning, they had 10 weapons modified and ready for testing. 3 days into the week of grace, launched a counterattack. It was a risk, a serious risk. His soldiers were tired. They were hungry, but they were also angry, and anger could be useful if it was directed properly. Chose the target carefully. A supply convoy moving through the mountains. It was protected, but not heavily. They did not believe humans could mount a serious attack. Led the assault. He attacked from the air whilst ground forces attacked from the hills. The modified weapons worked better than anyone expected. Soldiers fell. The convoy was damaged. Humans took the first major victory of the war. But it cost them. 15 soldiers died in the attack. Another 30 were wounded. Lisa Morgan worked through the night treating injuries. She ran out of pain medication. She ran out of antibiotics. She kept working anyway. Governor Hayes visited the medical center. He walked past rows of wounded soldiers. He saw Lisa Morgan covered in blood, still working on another patient. He understood what the colony was sacrificing. "We are holding," Hayes said to that morning, "but we are breaking." Knew this was true. They could not sustain this level of casualties and continue fighting. They had maybe 3 more days of active resistance before the colony had to surrender or face complete annihilation. But 3 days was enough. 3 days would bring the Discovery into firing range. The command structure was beginning to understand the situation differently. These humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They were proving to be far more difficult than anticipated. The Empire sent a formal communication to 442. It was a demand for surrender. The commander explained that he would allow the colony time to evacuate civilian populations if they surrendered immediately. If they continued resistance, he would destroy everything. Did not respond to the demand. He could not respond. If he surrendered, they would control the colony and any humans remaining would become slaves or prisoners. Instead, prepared for the final assault. Made contact with the Discovery on the colony's backup communications system. The signal was weak and intermittent, but it carried Henry Foster's voice across the void. "We are coming," Foster said. 48 hours. Hold for 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. 2 days to survive against an enemy that could destroy them entirely. Gathered his soldiers for the final briefing. "In 2 days help arrives," he told them. 2 days we have made the bleed. We have shown them that humans do not surrender. We have bought time for rescue. Now we hold. We hold this colony. We hold this line. The soldiers listened. Most of them would die in the next 2 days. They understood this. They accepted it. Stone was not a soldier, but she was brave. She asked to fight. Said yes. They gave her a modified weapon and a position on the highest building in the colony. From there, she could see approaching forces and warn defenders of incoming attacks. Governor Hayes organized the remaining civilians. He assigned them duties. Some would help distribute supplies. Some would help carry wounded to medical centers. Some would help prepare fortified positions. Everyone had a role. Everyone had purpose. Lisa Morgan prepared for the final assault. She had no more morphine. She had minimal antibiotics. She had bandages and sutures and determination. It would have to be enough. The night before the final assault, sat alone in the command center. He thought about Earth. He thought about the families of his soldiers. He thought about the children in the bunkers who would never see their homes rebuilt. But he also thought about flying against impossible odds. He thought about Stone studying enemy weapons to find weakness. He thought about Lisa Morgan refusing to stop treating patients. He thought about Governor Hayes keeping people calm when all reason said to despair. Humans were weak individually, but together they were strong. Together they were powerful. Together they were unstoppable. The final assault began at dawn on the 6th day. The forces attacked with overwhelming numbers. 300 troops, supported by ground-to-air weapons and energy cannons. Against them stood Commander Cross and 80 remaining soldiers. Against them stood the civilians of fighting for their lives and their home. The battle raged through the morning. Modified tactics worked. Human soldiers targeted the weak points in armor. Casualties mounted on both sides. Flew his fighter until his weapons were empty. Then he flew back to the airfield and loaded more weapons. He returned to the battle and flew again, over and over until the ground forces began to fall back. But they did not retreat far. They regrouped. They prepared for another assault. And in the communications center, received another message from the Discovery. 30 minutes until we enter attack range. 30 minutes. The commanders were receiving messages too, reports from the fleet in orbit. The humans in space were accelerating faster than anticipated. A human warship was approaching 442. The command made a decision. They would execute the final assault now. They would destroy the colony before the human reinforcement arrived. Watched the approaching forces. He had 80 soldiers. Half of them were wounded. They had weapons and courage and determination. They had 48 hours of resistance so far. In 30 minutes, they would have help. In 30 minutes, the sky would change. In 30 minutes, humanity would show the galaxy what fighting really meant. The Discovery entered weapons range at precisely 30 minutes past the predicted time. Captain Henry Foster did not wait for confirmation or verification. He ordered all weapons systems to full power immediately. The small human warship was vastly by the fleet, but Foster had something they did not expect. He had desperation and he had nothing to lose. The first volley from the Discovery struck a patrol ship. The blast was not large enough to destroy the ship, but it caused damage. It caused them to recognize a new threat. 3 warships changed their focus from the colony to the newly arrived threat. They turned their weapons toward the Discovery. Foster saw the ships moving to intercept him. He had anticipated this. He had a plan, though it was a desperate one. "Take us into the asteroid field around the planet," he ordered his navigation officer. "Fast patterns, unpredictable, make them work to hit us." The Discovery plunged into the maze of asteroids and debris orbiting 442. The ships followed, but they were larger and less maneuverable. Foster used this to his advantage. He wove between asteroids. He accelerated and decelerated in patterns that no strategic computer had anticipated. On the ground, Commander Cross saw the explosions in the sky. The light from weapons fire illuminated the clouds above the colony. They had a new problem. They had to defend against the human warship while also prosecuting their ground assault. The commander made a decision. He would split his forces. Some units would continue the assault on the colony. Others would move to support the defense against the Discovery. It was a mistake. Saw the forces split. He immediately ordered a counterattack. His remaining soldiers surged forward, using the modified weapons to devastating effect. Without their full complement of support forces, they began to lose ground. Governor Hayes made an announcement through the colony's broadcast system. The words were simple and direct. "Help has arrived. We are no longer alone. They need us to hold. We will hold." The colonists heard this message in the bunkers. It gave them what they needed most: hope, proof that they had not been abandoned, proof that someone remembered them. In the medical center, Lisa Morgan heard the announcement as she completed surgery on a wounded soldier. She looked up from her work and allowed herself a moment of belief that they might survive. Heard the message as he loaded weapons onto his fighter. He smiled for the first time in days. Stone heard the message as she continued to monitor positions from her building. She had seen the arrival of the human warship. She had watched the explosions. She understood what it meant. The battle in orbit became more intense. Captain Foster used every trick he knew. He struck at ships and then fled. He used the asteroid field as a shield. He coordinated his movements with impossible timing. Dr. Pierce, the Discovery's first officer, managed the weapons systems with perfect precision. She had been trained as a scientist, not a soldier, but she understood mathematics and trajectory. She calculated firing solutions and struck targets that the thought were too distant to hit. The warships were more powerful than the Discovery, but they were confused. They had never encountered human tactics before. They had never fought an opponent who was willing to die to accomplish a mission. One ship made a fatal mistake. It tried to cut off the Discovery's escape route. Foster accelerated directly at it. At the last moment he pulled up. The Discovery scraped past the ship so close that both crews could have exchanged words through the windows. Foster locked weapons onto that ship at point-blank range and fired everything the Discovery had. The warship exploded. It was the first major warship destroyed by humans. It was a symbolic victory. On the ground, the commander saw his fleet being damaged and disrupted. The colony was not surrendering. The human reinforcement was not running away. Something fundamental was changing. The commander made a new decision. He ordered the ground forces to mount one final, overwhelming assault. If they could destroy the colony completely before the human reinforcement could establish a position, they could claim victory. The assault came at sunset. It was the largest concentration of troops that had attacked the colony yet. 500 soldiers, supported by heavy weapons and armored vehicles. Against them was Cross with 60 soldiers, Stone with a signal flare, with one final load of weapons, and the civilians of fighting for their homes. Governor Hayes stood in the upper levels of the bunker system, directing civilians to assist defenders. He was not a soldier, but he could carry supplies. He could help move wounded. He could be useful. A bomb detonated near the medical center. The shock wave threw Lisa Morgan to the ground. For a moment, she could not breathe. When her lungs finally worked again, she assessed herself. No serious injuries. The medical center was damaged but still functional. She emerged from the center to see colonists carrying wounded. She began to work again immediately, treating injuries in the open as the battle raged around her. Cross saw that he was losing ground. The numbers were too overwhelming. His soldiers were dying, but they were also slowing the advance. They were buying minutes. Minutes turned into hours. Stone sent her signal. From her position on the high building, she sent a message to the Discovery. She told Henry Foster exactly where the commander was located. Foster received the message. He was in the middle of a combat maneuver, dodging weapons fire. Pierce heard the coordinates and calculated a new course. "We can do this," told Foster. "If we go now, if we push the engines to maximum." "Will the ship survive?" Foster asked. "No," said, "but the shot will land." Foster made the decision for both of them. He changed course directly toward the planet. The Discovery dove through the fleet, and Foster opened fire on the coordinates had provided. The ground assault crumbled. The commander and his command staff were killed by the shot. Without leadership, without coordination, the ground forces lost cohesion. Cross ordered his soldiers forward. They advanced, pushing the back. The battle became a rout. The fleet, seeing their ground commander destroyed and their warships taking damage, made a collective decision. They began to withdraw, not in panic but in organized retreat. The Discovery, its engines damaged and shields nearly gone, managed to land near the colony. Henry Foster felt the impact as the ship settled on the ground. He looked at his instruments. The engines were failing. The shields were offline. The ship would not fly again. But they had made it. Foster opened the communication channel to the ground. His voice carried to every speaker in the colony. "This is Captain Henry Foster of the human research vessel Discovery. We have secured a landing zone. This colony is under human protection. Repeat, this colony is under human protection." The battle stopped. They completed their withdrawal. The siege was over. Commander Cross walked across the battlefield. He saw his soldiers emerging from their positions. Some were celebrating, some were crying, some were dying. Governor Hayes emerged from the bunker. He walked through the colony and saw what remained of the home they had built. It was broken and burned and devastated, but it was still theirs. Captain Lisa Morgan treated the final wounded of the day. She had no more supplies left at all, but no more wounded came. The battle was finished. Landed his fighter for the last time. His fuel gauge showed empty. He had pushed the small aircraft to its absolute limits. The young pilot climbed out of the cockpit and fell to his knees. He had survived. Stone climbed down from her building and walked through the colony. She looked at Henry Foster as he emerged from the Discovery. "We did it," she said simply. "You did it," Foster replied. "We just arrived at the end." The night was silent. The ships were gone. The bombardment had stopped. For the first time in 6 days, there was no sound of weapons. The colony was battered. It was broken. Thousands were dead. The infrastructure was destroyed. But it was free. And in the darkness above, the stars burned like diamonds, and somewhere out there, more human ships were coming. The count of the dead took 3 days. 8,437 people died defending 442. The number was read out in a formal ceremony where Governor Hayes spoke for the colony and Commander Cross spoke for the military. Both men were changed. Both had aged years in the span of days. The survivors emerged from the bunkers to see the devastation. The upper levels of the colony were rubble. The farms were burned. The homes were destroyed. What had been built over 5 years of hard work was gone in 6 days of invasion. But the colony itself remained. 442 was still inhabited by human beings who refused to leave. Henry Foster and Pierce began the work of establishing a military perimeter around the colony. The Discovery was damaged beyond immediate repair, so it became a defensive position. Foster mounted weapons on the ship to create a barrier against any new threat. More human warships were coming. Earth had received the complete data about the Empire. The United Earth Defense Force was mobilizing. New ships and soldiers and supplies were being sent to 442. What had been a small colony was becoming a human fortress. Lisa Morgan visited the cemetery where they buried the dead. So many graves, so many names she had tried to save and could not. She stood there for a long time, and when she left, she returned to the medical center. The medical center needed rebuilding. Lisa worked with her team to create a new facility from salvaged equipment. They treated wounds that would never fully heal. They counseled survivors who had lost everything. One patient was a young woman named who had lost her entire family, was only 23. She had seen her parents die and her brothers die and her sister die. Asked Lisa if she was the doctor who was supposed to save people. "I tried," Lisa said. "Not hard enough," replied. Lisa had no answer. She sat with through the night and neither of them slept. Stone became the leader of reconstruction efforts. She organized people to clear rubble and salvage materials. She designed new defensive structures and better shelters. She was given the official title of Chief Engineer for 442 Colony, but understood something that others did not. The colony would never be rebuilt exactly as it was. It would be built stronger. It would be built for war. Governor Hayes tried to return to his administrative duties, but everything had changed. He was no longer just managing a colonial settlement. He was leading a human fortress. He made decisions that sent soldiers to dangerous positions. He made decisions that determined who received scarce resources. One morning, Hayes found Stone in the reconstruction area, standing and staring at the empty space where the water treatment plant had been. "I keep thinking about the people who died there," said. 300 in one moment. "We will rebuild it," Hayes said. "Better?" asked. "Yes," Hayes confirmed. "Better, stronger, more defended." "That is not what I meant," replied. "I meant, will we rebuild something that serves human life, or will we rebuild something that prepares for more war?" Hayes did not answer because he knew the truth. The colony would rebuild for war. Was promoted to major and given command of the colony's new fighter squadron. 5 new fighters arrived with the first reinforcement fleet, trained pilots to fight if they returned. He trained them to be aggressive. He trained them to not fear death. The young pilot who had lost his sister to disease did not smile anymore. He had seen the up close. He understood what it meant to hate an enemy. Henry Foster remained on the ground with his crew. The Discovery was too damaged to return to space, but it served as an excellent command center. Foster worked with Cross to develop tactics that could work against forces. Foster began writing a manual. It described human tactical doctrine. It explained why humans could defeat technologically superior enemies. The manual emphasized unpredictability, adaptation, and willingness to sacrifice. Pierce helped Foster gather information about military practices. She compiled everything they had learned in the battle. She created detailed analysis of weaknesses in equipment and strategy. The information was sent to Earth in secure transmissions. Military leaders on Earth read about the battle at 442 and made decisions that would change humanity forever. Earth began building new warships designed specifically to fight the Empire. 3 months after the invasion ended, new ships began arriving. Military transports brought soldiers and weapons and supplies. Scientific vessels arrived to study the equipment that humans had captured. 442 was no longer a civilian colony. It had become a military installation. Governor Hayes held a ceremony to honor the dead. He spoke of sacrifice and courage. He spoke of humanity's determination to survive. He spoke of the future. "They came to destroy us," Hayes said to the assembled colonists and soldiers. "They believed we were weak. They believed we would break. They were wrong. We are humans and we do not break. We do not surrender. We do not accept defeat." Commander Cross stood beside Hayes. Cross was no longer in charge of a small colony defense force. He was now general in charge of 442 military operations. He had a staff. He had multiple units. He had authority that extended across human space. Lisa Morgan was nominated for the highest civilian honor for her medical service. The award was presented by Henry Foster. Lisa accepted it with no expression of happiness. She was thinking about the young woman who had lost her family, had recovered from her physical injuries, but her psychological wounds were deeper than any medical knowledge could reach. Stone was given the title of Chief Architect for Human Colonial Defense. Her job was to design the defensive structures for all human colonies. She would spend the rest of her life building fortresses instead of hospitals. The Empire watched the human response with confusion and concern. The Empire had expected humans to retreat to Earth. Instead, humans were reinforcing 442. Instead, humans were building weapons designed to fight Instead, humans were preparing for war. The High Command sent a formal diplomatic message to Earth. They offered to withdraw if humans would cease military expansion. Earth's response was a simple declaration. Humanity would defend itself. Humanity would prepare for future conflicts. Humanity would not be destroyed. It was a statement of defiance. It was a promise of war. 6 months after the invasion, stood in the control tower of the 442 spaceport. He looked up at the sky and saw human warships arriving in formation. The ships were sleek and powerful. They were built for combat. They carried missiles and weapons. This was humanity's response to the invasion, not retreat, not negotiation, preparation. Thought about his sister. He thought about all the people who had died. He thought about the who believed humans were weak. The young pilot had a new mission. He would lead a fighter wing in offensive operations against positions. Earth had authorized humans to stop defending and start attacking. Commander Cross stood in the command center of 442 Fortress. He was now called by a new title, General Cross. He had authority over all human military operations in the sector. General Cross made a speech to his soldiers. "The Empire sent an invasion force. We defeated it. Now they must understand that humanity is not a minor species to be conquered. Humanity is a power in the galaxy. We will defend our people. We will expand our territory. We will make the galaxy understand that humans are not to be underestimated." His soldiers cheered. They understood what was coming. They understood that peace was over. Stone stood in the ruins of what had been a civilian settlement. She looked at her plans for new defensive structures. She was no longer rebuilding a colony. She was building a fortress. She was building humanity's military stronghold. Governor Hayes no longer worked in civilian administration. He worked in military logistics. He managed weapons production and soldier training and supply lines for a growing military. Lisa Morgan trained new medical personnel to handle combat injuries. The peaceful colony doctor had become a military medical commander. The story of it spread through human space. It became a symbol of human courage. Songs were written about it. Stories were told about it. And in the dark space between worlds, human ships accelerated toward the frontier. Humanity had entered the galactic stage. Humanity had shown that it could fight. Humanity had shown that it could win. The Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had believed humans were weak. They had believed humans would accept conquest. They had believed humans would bow to a superior power. They were wrong. Humans did not surrender. Humans did not accept defeat. When humans were pushed to the edge of destruction, they pushed back. They fought. They survived. They grew stronger. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human power had begun. And it all started in a small colony called 442, where 15,000 desperate people refused to die, and where humanity learned that together they could challenge the stars themselves.